In this video, I want to show you how you can take your family and friends on a comprehensive tour of the moon that they're never going to forget. I'm going to provide you with a sightseeing map, talking points, reference materials, and historical context to make for an awesome evening of observing with your telescope or binoculars. Hi, my name is Chris, and welcome to my channel. This video has its roots all the way back on International Observe the Moon Night of October 4th, 2025. The International Observe the Moon Night is an annual public outreach event that encourages observation, appreciation, and understanding of the moon. And I was going to do my part. I was going to do my part by doing a tour of the moon, including a large number of famous landmarks, like the seas or mare we see with the naked eye from Earth, as well as some of the more spectacular craters and formations, such as the Tycho and Copernicus craters, and mountain ranges like the Monte Apennines. That's right, the Monte Apennines. And most of all, I was going to visit some of the places where humans have landed, including the robotic missions from the United States and Soviet Union, as well as the American Apollo missions. So why has it taken me this long to bring this video to you? Well, because compiling a tour of the moon the way that I had wanted to do it is quite overwhelming. I mean, I was actually going to include a fun activity where you could simulate a parachute planetary landing even though the moon had no atmosphere. So I guess you'd have to imagine that the probe was heading to Venus or Mars. Suffice it to say, I was getting quite carried away, and so the footage I had initially shot sat on my hard drive gathering dust until this past February. You see, in February, we were all gearing up for the launch of the Artemis 2 mission, which would bring humans back to the moon, at least into lunar orbit for the first time since the 1970s. And my astronomy club was putting on a whole themed public event. I finally compiled my research, built a very cool presentation, and coded a lunar lander game fashioned after the classic lander game of the 1980s, which I called Artemis Lander. And I finally put this video together. So why don't we get started? All of the images in this video were taken with my 6-inch telescope. It is a Celestron NexStar 6SE. It's a Schmidt-Cassegrain reflector on a go-to mount, which I generally use on a wedge for astrophotography. So if that's something that interests you, please check out some of my other videos. It's incredible to think that less than 70 years separates us from the very first artificial satellite launched into Earth orbit. Sputnik, launched by the USSR on coincidentally October 4th, 1957, ushered in a new era for humanity. The Soviets followed up that accomplishment by putting Yuri Gagarin into orbit less than 4 years later. The United States responded by forming NASA in 1958 and starting to launch their own rockets under the Mercury program. And then, in May of 1961, the US set their sights on the moon. It was on September 12, 1962, that President John F. Kennedy delivered the famous "We choose to go to the moon" speech, a dream that would be realized when the Eagle landed with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin in July of 1969. The entirety of the Apollo program spanned a little over 1 decade, roughly the amount of time it took to record and show all of the seasons of Stranger Things, and ended with Apollo 17 in December of 1972. The Apollo program may have gotten most of the attention, but it wasn't the whole story. Prior to Apollo 11, there were a number of robotic missions carried out by both the United States and the Soviet Union. The Americans sent the Ranger, Lunar Orbiter, and Surveyor probes and robotic missions, while the Soviets had their Luna program. Much has happened since, including humanity sending probes to the other planets in our solar system and beyond, including, for some reason, a Tesla Roadster. We have pushed the limits of space survival and engineering closer to home with an almost constant presence of orbital space stations. We experimented with reusable space delivery systems and sent up incredible tools of exploration. And starting in the 2010s, we have been sending robotic missions back to the moon. China's Chang'e 3 landed in December of 2013. India sent up the Chandrayaan-3 lander in July of 2023, the same year as Russia attempted to land Luna 25. Both India and Russia hoped to land near the South Pole, no doubt looking for signs of water ice. Our journey begins with key features of the moon itself. This image of the moon was taken with my Celestron Nexstar 6 SE telescope, using a focal reducer, which effectively shortened the focal length of the telescope to 1000 millimeters, allowing the entire disk of the moon to be visible in my field of view. You'll notice that not all images of the moon are the same. In fact, some look much better and more detailed than others. This is because there is actually a better time when looking at certain features and landmarks. When the moon is full, there is very little contrast on the surface because the light of the sun falls flat. It is a great time to see the moon in its entirety, but not so great if you're looking for those breathtaking views. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to keep to images that I had taken when the moon was full. This way, we can navigate anywhere we want to. But that comes at the expense of those really cool shadows, which really make the moon look striking. If you're interested, I will include a link to the best times to view each of the key locations we're going to be visiting in the description of this video. Early observers had no way of knowing what the dark splotches on the moon were. It was theorized at one point that they might be vast oceans and seas, and that is how they were named. We now know that these darker regions on the moon's surface formed when massive impacts created large basins that were later flooded by basaltic lava. The largest of these dark regions is called the Ocean of Storms, or Oceanus Procellarum, and is the only area which we call an ocean. Next to it is the Sea of Rains, or the Mare Imbrium. This large spot over to the right is the Sea of Serenity, or Mare Serenitatis. Next, we have the famous Sea of Tranquility, where we'll find Tranquility Base, the landing site of Apollo 11. Its Latin name is the Mare Tranquillitatis. To the right of the Sea of Tranquility, we find the Sea of Crises, or Mare Crisium, and further below is the Sea of Fertility, the Mare Fecunditatis. Heading back over to the Ocean of Storms, we also have the Mare Cognitum, the site of a number of missions. There are several other seas, such as the Mare Nubium and the Mare Humorum, both visually close to the Mare Cognitum. There are also Mare Vaporum and Mare Nectaris. These are both smaller basins that have not been direct landing sites for any of the major lunar missions. I think this here is a very cool image. I made it by taking more detailed images of the lunar surface using a Barlow lens, which increases the focal length of my telescope, along with a planetary camera, which has a higher pixel density. I overlaid the tiles from the planetary camera onto the lower resolution image of the entire surface of the moon in order to create this composite image. We'll be using this map as a reference for the other places we visit. Once again, I'm going to include a link to this map in the video description below. Besides the mare, there are several very cool, enormous craters on the surface which are visible with almost any telescope or decent set of binoculars. This here is Tycho crater, one of the most prominent and easiest features to spot on the moon, especially when it's full. What makes Tycho stand out immediately is these bright streaks radiating outward in all directions. These are called ray systems, and they were formed when an asteroid struck the moon, blasting material across the surface for thousands of kilometers. Tycho is actually relatively young as a crater, at about 100 million years old, which is why its features are still so sharp and well defined. If you look closely towards the center, you can even make out a small peak. That's a mountain that was formed when the surface rebounded upward after the impact. While the rays look best during a full moon like this, if you observe Tycho when the sun is lower in the lunar sky near the terminator, the shadows along the crater walls and central peak become much more dramatic, really giving you a sense of its depth and structure. Next, we'll look at Copernicus crater, one of the most impressive and well-defined craters on the moon, and a favorite target for amateur astronomers. Copernicus is located in the Ocean of Storms and is much larger than Tycho, spanning about 93 kilometers across. What really makes it stand out are its terraced walls and complex internal structure, which are the result of immense energy released during the impact that formed it. If you look closely, you can see multiple peaks rising from the center of the crater. These central peaks formed in much the same way as Tycho's, where the surface rebounded upward immediately after impact. The crater walls themselves appear stepped or layered, which gives Copernicus a very three-dimensional appearance, again, especially when the sun is low in the sky. Copernicus also has its own system of rays, although they are not quite as extensive or bright as those from Tycho. Still, they are clearly visible during a full moon and help highlight the relatively young age of this crater. When observing Copernicus near the terminator, the shadows cast along its walls and central peaks create one of the most striking views available on the lunar surface. It is one of the best examples of a complex impact crater, and a great target whether you are using binoculars or a telescope. Now, over here, we have another striking feature. This one is called the Aristarchus Plateau and the Vallis Schröteri. The Aristarchus Plateau is a raised region sitting within the Ocean of Storms, and it stands out as one of the brightest areas on the entire moon. At its edge is the crater Aristarchus itself, which is actually one of the brightest craters you can see, especially when the moon is near full. What makes this area particularly interesting is that it is also shaped by volcanic activity. The plateau is thought to be one of the most geologically complex regions on the moon, with evidence of ancient lava flows and volcanic processes. Running through the plateau is Vallis Schröteri, often referred to as the Cobra Head because of the way it begins. This is a massive winding channel known as a sinuous rill, formed by flowing lava rather than by an impact. It stretches over 150 kilometers and is the largest feature of its kind on the moon. Under higher magnification and when there's enough shadow, you can trace the path of this channel as it snakes across the surface. It gives you a rare glimpse into the moon's volcanic past. This is Montes Apennines, one of the most prominent mountain ranges on the moon, and one that is closely tied to the formation of the Sea of Rains. These mountains were formed when a massive impact created the Imbrium Basin billions of years ago. The force of that impact uplifted the crust, forming this long curved mountain range that marks the southeastern edge of the basin. The range stretches for over 600 kilometers, and some of its peaks rise as high as 5 kilometers, making them among the tallest on the lunar surface. If you look closely, you can see the rugged texture of the terrain and the long shadows cast by the peaks, which really help to define the shape of the range. This is also one of the best places on the moon to get a sense of scale, as you are looking at a mountain range formed by one of the most powerful impact events in the moon's history. Our last stop of natural formations is the Shackleton crater and the lunar South Pole. Shackleton crater sits almost exactly at the moon's south pole, and because of that unique position, its interior never sees sunlight. The sun always skims along the horizon here, which means the crater floor is in permanent shadow. These permanently shadowed regions are of great interest because they are some of the coldest places in the solar system, and scientists believe that they may contain deposits of water ice, and these may have been preserved for billions of years. At the same time, the rims of nearby craters can receive near continuous sunlight, making this region especially important for future exploration. It offers a combination of potential resources and relatively stable lighting conditions, which are important for solar panels. This is one of the main reasons why modern missions, including the Artemis program, are targeting the lunar South Pole. It represents the next phase of lunar exploration, where the goal is to establish a longer term presence on the moon. This is the end of part 1 of this video. The next part is going to focus on actual places that humanity has visited on the moon. The landing sites of Apollo, Chandrayaan, Chang'e. Look in the video description for the script of this video, as well as for the map showing all of the locations that I'm covering. Part 2 will be coming out soon, so stay tuned. Until then, thank you for watching, and clear skies.